This is the Fulton Podcast.
That's actually the plot question I have for you is like, why, what was she comfortable with? Because she really was flirting with a lot of edge of the wall stuff, where, Ethan and her can't be friends anymore, that sort of thing. You
Right.
shoot Simon Pegg in the head, and no one's happy with you.
Yeah, that would be.
Well, I think she assumed that her bullet was going to go straight through the glass like it should have, because I mean that's what
I remember.
I feel like
There
she
were
could be
definitely
competent
people sitting
enough.
in.
Yeah.
There were definitely people sitting
There's
in the
definitely
back
people
seat.
capable
That was
of
the
that,
one
I will
thing
say
I
that.
was. It was less to me about the glass as much as it was about, like, guys, if the bullet does not lodge in this guy, I would not shoot.
You're going to put it in the leg of the person behind him.
Well,
Yeah.
That's what
or
you're
at
gonna do, yeah.
least the
Yeah.
leg. If not,
But
oh, well, looks like we killed Benji, like
I
you're
think
saying.
I think the choice she had was either don't go home, which means the MI6
Is gonna hunt you down
The
and kill
government
you,
is going to
pretty much.
consider her an enemy of the state, hunt her down. She's going to go to whatever the UK equivalent of Guantanamo Bay is. I think it's called Ireland, and like torture her or whatever, or capture or kill her even. So I think that considered where she didn't really know Benji that well. I don't remember if she got to know Benji really that well in the first one. I mean,
I think
he knew
I think it
her.
was just.
She-
I think it was
she
just plot. I think it was
defibed
just
him. That was
plotness.
exciting.
They
Well,
did when they're
plot.
writing the story, they decide how they want to do this, and
Yeah.
and it's either she didn't see it or she didn't care, but it wasn't like if she actually she in other moments she's definitely portrayed as a person who would not just shoot Benji in the head.
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually
and
something I
go,
liked
"Well,
about her
collateral-
character.
Collateral damage. She
That's
wasn't
something
that
I liked
person.
about her character is it seemed like she made sense. When she pulled the trigger, she went from, she would hesitate, and that hesitation was important to me because it was her thinking, okay, here's me weighing the sides of this thing, and it's worth it to start shooting. I'm not going to try and hit you anyway, but I'm still going to start shooting.
Right.
It's like when
Yeah.
Ethan Hunt tries to run her over. If I remember correctly, she does take a few shots at him. More than a few.
I don't remember.
And the same thing happens
I
when
think
she's
most-
after Lane, and Ethan Hunt is like, well, I guess that's what's happening.
I think
we disagree here.
Yeah. Well, my impression was that they every shot she shoots into the car is really pretty much directed at Lane and only at Lane, and she's just so good. She's just so good that she knows she's gonna miss all these other people. She's like John Wick.
Oh, I don't
except
think that's
for-
not the vibe I
she's
got
like
for sure.
MI6 John Wick.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a risk, and
Well,
that's
that's what
why
I
the other
saw,
characters
yeah.
are irritated. But it's like dang it. You cut that a little close, didn't you? Not like she's trying to kill us.
Yeah.
You know, and the same thing with Ethan running into her with a car. It's like he knows that she's not going to be killed by the car. What he's doing is he's
Well, he knows he's got to flirt with it. That's the weird part. That's what I
He
thought
does.
made
Well,
sense.
he
Because
does,
he's got to
and
flirt
that's-
with putting her in danger. Because
but he's not intentionally trying to do it. What he's
Right.
trying to do is stop her shooting and following them. So he smashes the motorcycle and stops her from thinking about how to shoot at the car because she
Yeah.
has to think about rolling over the car. So
yeah. Well, and I thought it was really interesting how.
it's interesting to me how a lot of action movies
Yeah.
have this very similar sort of visual language with the way that they treat action.
Now we
It's-
can talk
it's
about
like,
visual side, Craig.
well, because you have
can.
So you have a certain amount of things that are possible with CGI, and you have a certain amount of things that are possible with stunts, and you have a certain amount of things that are possible with stunts that are obviously stunts and not CGI.
Right.
You kind of know what I mean? And then it's like you start building a story, and like you were saying about how they all seem to be a bit in this world. They're depicted as slightly more durable than in real life reality.
I mean, it makes
And-
the story more interesting. So I accept
well,
it.
right, and
I
it's
just think
because it's
something
centered
I have to point
around
out.
it's because it's centered around the action, and
character
you'll
flaw.
notice that like almost every Captain America movie, Captain America is not depicted as strong as Superman. He's
Yeah.
depicted as pretty much double normal
stronger
strength.
than average man.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he is, and even though he fits more or less the exact same archetype as Superman, where he's like this paragon of virtue, and he always does the right thing and makes the hard choice.
He's
You
not
know,
like
he's-
Batman curling
the
a
incorrupt-
200-pound man in armor off of the side of a cliff.
Yeah. Well, that's
remember that?
actually the exact same sort of thing.
Used the
In
pulley
Batman
system.
Begins, where you have
Called his arm.
where you have Bruce Wayne, and he just he just arm curls Liam Neeson back up off of the thing. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah,
Batman
yeah.
is essentially that same sort of he's a different side of that archetype. But he's the hyper capable man. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's what that's one of the other things I thought was kind of cool is, did you guys see the plot twist coming at the end there when they actually exposed these guys? Do you remember?
Actually, with the mask reveal with Benji?
Yeah, the mask reveal with Benji.
As soon as they started putting the mask on Benji, or they said Benji's going undercover, I was like, this is to reveal Henry Cavill as the bad guy.
Yeah.
I leaned over to my girlfriend and I was like, Betsy, it's a mask. It's a mask. And then she's like, what? I was like, just watch. And so,
I will admit, I knew something was going on, but I wasn't sure what.
It was funny. I watched that scene, and it's funny. Earlier in the movie, that scene where they have the guy and they were showing the nukes, and apparently the nukes had blown up all these cities, and they were like, yeah, he succeeded. Now we need to catch your accomplices and all that. I was a little bit confused.
They almost had me for a minute. Yeah.
And they almost had me at the start of it, and then... I was like, something's off, and about maybe 2/3 of the way through, I was like, yep, it's definitely a setup.
As soon as like the bombs go off, I go,
and
no,
then, right?
he would never let that happen.
Yeah, but I think the really cool thing about that setup, where they have Alec Baldwin come in and talk, and he's obviously in on the whole thing, is the fact that we haven't been let in on the fact that Alec is in on the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so when he finally... So when I saw Benji, they have that shot that just telegraphs the whole thing. Benji looks at Solomon Lane, and they both have the same face, and there's like a moment, and you're like, what is that? Is it okay? I get it. We're going to the exchange, and he's trying to look like him.
What I wasn't sure about is when that was going to
like,
occur. That's all.
It was like right before. It was like right before. Benji has that little head twitch in the scene where he and Cavill are talking to each other, and he just has a little it's like, oh, it's Benji, and you know it. It was like right in the
I don't think I
maybe
noticed that.
5 seconds before that I went, oh, it was like I got it. Yep.
But yeah, like I said, I was saying earlier, I don't know if it's just me having seen enough movies, knowing that the masks are part of the universe. Because, previously it's like you always forget. You're like, oh, okay. You just forget about the masks, and then there's the reveal. Tom Cruise is pretending to be the bad guy or whatever to get the girl to admit to her crime. Or whether it's that I've seen enough, or it's just like I'm old enough and it's like, okay, this is where this plot's going. But both of those, I was definitely like, okay, this is a mask situation. And I think they have good potential to use that and reverse that on the audience.
Yeah.
Is where like, okay, you think this is masks. It's like, no, this is not a mask. This is real. And then you're just like, oh my gosh, they're supposed to undo this. And then
that's a good point.
It's an interesting thing that they can use as a tool if they continue this.
Yeah.
It's funny because they really did a lot of that development in Mission Impossible 3. And that was the one. It's funny because I was looking at them, looking at reviews people had of each of them, and generally Mission Impossible 3 is the one that everybody hates the most.
Really?
It's really funny, yeah.
No,
yeah.
I thought it was 2. Everybody hates 2.
Well,
the most.
I think 2.
Okay, 2's got its things.
I think 3
but
is.
nobody hated.
Is the
Nobody
second
liked the mask
most
switching
disliked.
on. I liked it.
Right,
to be perfect.
The what?
The mask switching that was going on in there, and, like where they mask the girl as his wife and then shoot her. I mean, I can see how that would be a little irritating for some people, but I don't know. I felt like that stuff made sense. That wasn't. It was a villain thing, but it was a good. I mean, it made sense villain thing.
I really liked it. I thought the third one was one of my favorites.
And how the arms dealer just was playing mind games with you, kind of turns the whole IMF thing on its head a little bit in a way that even this movie didn't pull off, I think. But
that's kind of true. It's like, for all they're talking about how the Syndicate is so awesome,
there's not that much cloak and dagger. There really isn't.
Yeah, I mean, the only example is really Henry Cavill's character, and we pretty much know that something's off with him pretty early on.
Oh yeah, he showed up and I immediately pegged him for a bad guy. I mean,
I pegged him in the trailers.
Like,
I was
2 seconds.
He's bad. Even in the trailers, I was like, it's Henry Cavill. He's going to be a bad guy.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if he's going to be a bad guy the entire time or if he was going to be a bad guy
in the end or something like that. Yeah.
But yeah, that's just how I came up with that. Did you guys also catch that the arms dealer girl, that she was the original arms dealer, that she was Max's daughter?
I did not.
I didn't think of that
I
until
think
just
it's
now.
just been so
like
damn
when you
long
just started
since
to
I've seen
say
the
it, I was
first
like,
one.
oh.
That actually makes perfect sense.
It makes sense.
She's
It's a cool
basically
thing.
the same character. Yeah.
I didn't pick up on it. I didn't. I had my brother-in-law told me after the fact. He was like, "Yeah, did you know that was Max's daughter?" And I was like, "What?"
I think
Yeah,
I
like right when
remember
you started to
hearing-
say that, I was like, oh, that's what that is.
I think I
didn't
actually
look it up.
remember hearing it.
Wow.
There was like one line.
She
There
said
was like
something-
one
she
line about it,
mentioned
and it was
Max.
like, something mentioned Max, and I was like, Max, that sounds kind of familiar, but I can't remember from where.
Yeah, 'cause
And
she
then-
mentioned her mom in the speech when she was in that VIP area.
Oh, that's right.
Ah.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
This may have something to do with the fact that she was pretty, but she seemed like a much more compelling villain than Solomon Lane.
Yeah.
I saw a review by, what was his name?
Yeah.
Chris Stuckman. He's pretty good most of the time. I like him on YouTube. And he was talking about how the villains were fairly memorable, and that sometimes that Mission Impossible has a problem with that. And I'll say Solomon Lane and Henry Cavill are as the faces of the Syndicate. They're more memorable than Ghost Protocol's villain, which was that one dude who is something. He was
Russian guy.
Yeah, the Soviet, not the actual like KGB guy who turns out to be okay.
Yeah, I know what
the
you're
one
talking
who's
about. I
trying
like
to
the
get the
KGB
world
guy.
to
He was fun.
explode everybody.
Yeah.
He's trying to start a nuclear war as per usual, and he's all raving about how population is too high. We got to nuke the world to bring on the next stage of.
Isn't that the guy they
evolution.
brought in? Essentially, the guy they brought in on this movie.
Well,
it wasn't exactly
that was
the
the
same.
thing is that they have that guy, and he says that he has that motivation, right? And then in the next one, they have Solomon Lane, who's essentially that guy except for slightly improved. He's a different character, but he has like the exact same haircut. He dresses in a suit, but now he has glasses, and he has an actual voice and character. And he also has a gun and shoots a person, so you know that he's bad right off the bat. And you didn't see that with the other guy, which is true. He's just like, I am a crazy intellectual for like the first half of the movie, and then he like escapes during the Saudi Arabia sequence, but you don't really see him before that. And you're
Right.
like, what the hell? He was kind of a lame villain. And then
That's why for me the
then you have
memorable
Solomon
ones.
Lane, and now Solomon
yeah.
Lane has a beard, and they're talking about how he's tortured and stuff, or intimidated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you have him and Henry Cavill and the Syndicate, and they're all like, they're like Spectre in it's like we cause random terrorist attacks for no reason.
Well, and that whole Kashmir thing was not really. I mean, that was in. I thought, as somebody who follows some geopolitics, I thought that made a lot of sense, and it was something that not everybody would think about.
Yeah, I mean, they did have a reason for why they were doing this.
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
was- and
I mean, it made a lot of sense to me because if you spark off a war between Pakistan and India, people are going to take sides pretty quick. Pakistan's attached to places like North Korea and Iran. And
those stand-up guys.
yeah, those stand-up guys, and Iran's attached to Syria, and Syria's attached to Russia. I mean, things get out of hand pretty quick.
Yep.
They don't have to, and that's the thing. I don't think that would have worked, honestly. I think
Yeah.
the United States and Russia would have watched and gone, man, that was stupid. And
Yeah.
no one really gives people credit to do that,
That
but
was
I think
super
they
tragic.
would have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have
I think people
the Syndicate-
overestimate how much influence we have over Indian politics. But anyhow,
Yeah, but you have them as villains, and then of course this is something pretty much not only I care about, but when you have the henchmen, and they are really thinly drawn, and it's
they really were, yeah, and that's for
like
sure.
The
We didn't get
syndicate-
any
the syndicate
characters,
at large,
really, except for
they're
Cable.
basically only defining characteristic is that they're Western agents who are bad,
Yeah, that was a little weak. I agree
and
with
that
that
gives them the ability to basically appear wherever they're needed, like in that CIA strike team that
Yeah.
is there, and so they end up shooting the loyal ones, and it's sort of like
That was a good
every
scene, but
with
it was a little weird.
people from every scene with people from the CIA was like that one was like the end of Captain America: Winter Soldier, where it's like you don't know who's who.
Yeah, you
and
know
they all
who's
start
good and
shooting
who's
each
bad.
other.
I did find
But
the
it's
whole
like besides that, I cannot see them
guys
like
are
being
kinda
having
weak.
a super compelling motivation. They talk a little bit about it, and they're like, "What if your government asked you to do something, and then it was all a lie?" And I'm like, guys, you're in the
Well, how
You're in the
often does that really
intelligence
happen?
business.
Those people just. How often does it really happen? I mean, really, those people just become contractors. Let's be honest.
But yeah, basically,
They just want to make money now. You know,
right.
it's like
It's
they're
like
no
they
longer
don't-
true believers.
Yeah, they don't
Yeah.
have this true believer syndrome, except for it's not impossible. I mean, you see it every now and then, but it's usually
It's all stupid
it's usually
people.
in a,
Let me be clear.
well,
it's all
usually
dumb
in a
people.
sort of lazier way than
I'm saying
than
in
this.
reality,
So
the only
it's-
time you ever see that is with
it's
stupid
like
people.
I think I wrote a whole thing on. Well, actually, I wrote a whole I wrote like a whole sketch on villains this afternoon about how
Yeah.
you had it's like you have a TV show, right? And this guy brings his he has a picture of some of the cast's costumes, and he's like, okay, look at these guys, and it's like they look so generic. Everybody's dressed in black, and they're all white guys, and they wear sunglasses, and they have machine guns, and that's like their whole character. And it's like, what tell me what these guys do. And they're like, I don't know, you know. Anyway, it's a big long joke about that. Maybe you'll see it eventually on the channel. And
So what's next on our list, or are we still working through the philosophy category there?
philosophy category.
I had some questions. There's some quotes in this movie
Okay.
where some people said some things, and I was like, "What does that even mean?" So, so there's that
I'm not the hero.
there's that manifesto,
deserves,
right?
but I know what that it needs.
That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But so there's that manifesto that was written that you find out was written by Henry Cavill.
Yeah.
That was I didn't ever pick up on
Okay,
that.
so at the end they
Weird.
mentioned, he goes, I didn't write that so that you could die or something like that. He just
Something.
basically
Oh,
says, I
got it.
wrote it because for some reason.
Locke.
So regardless, he says there cannot be peace without there first being a great suffering. The greater the suffering, the greater the peace. Does that actually mean something, or is that like one of those quote unquote brain twisters?
I think it's a brain twister.
It's kind of like the thing from like Assassin's Creed where they say like nothing is true but everything is permitted. It's like, what does that mean? I
Well,
don't
I actually,
understand.
it's I don't
John
know.
can answer it first.
Is it just like a
we can
need
talk
a-
about that one later, but
we just need a bad guy?
Well, I think part of it is, but it's also partly you have people like Paul Ehrlich, who wrote a book called The Population Bomb, and it was sold really well like in the 70s, and he was like, everybody is going to be dead by 2000, or like a quarter of the world's population is going to die because we can't feed them. And of course now we're here, and that hasn't happened. So
Well,
there were guys who were
yeah.
even older than that who were like, I can't remember what this guy's name was, but it was like the 1800s or late 1700s, and he was talking about Thomas Malthus, that was his name.
Yeah.
And he would talk about how like eventually the society's population growth outstrips its ability to feed them, and so they all start dying. And in practice, that's not really true. But
Well,
I
it's
mean,
only-
Thanos is
yeah.
essentially the same guy.
That's what I was gonna say.
You know, and so it's just this, and then they also have the same villain, and this is one I actually thought did it well. I thought Thanos did it fairly well in a kind of comic booky way, but snap. And but the
Oh snap!
the best example I can think of at using this and actually making it work and making me believe it was probably Kingsman with Samuel L. Jackson's character. And that's because he is a satirical character. You're just taking
Yeah.
this kind of absurd principle, and you have this guy who's doing it, and he is that guy who's so stupid rich, and he's got enough principle or whatever, but he's not got enough sense, and so he just goes, yeah, we're gonna run out of people eventually, or we're gonna run out of food and stuff eventually. So why don't we just snap our fingers and kill a bunch of them? And it's like, and it works. It's like you're going, wow, you're a disgusting human being, but at the same time, I kind of understand why you would do that. You kind of absurd cartoon character.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work in the sequel. If we ever want to talk about other spy movies, you have what's her name, the drug dealer lady in the sequel. Did you see the sequel, Kingsman?
I have not yet.
I'm trying to remember.
She
if
kind
I
of
did
has
bother
she
to
kind of
see
has
that.
a similar sort of absurdly complex.
Oh no, I didn't see
absurd
it yet.
plan.
Yeah.
And I saw it, but it really wasn't nearly it pulled off as well.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Well, and
but the,
let me-
but
let
the
me
first
say-
one is really good. Samuel L. Jackson does an excellent job in that role.
Let me say something kind of interesting on the regard of philosophy. And, if we look at the villain in Mission Impossible, there are some things about his like you were saying, where he's basically run on some sayings that really don't quite make sense.
Yeah.
Great suffering means great peace. It's like, what does that even mean? And now I'm like, as an engineer, I'm like, okay, does that mean if we have like a little bit of suffering, we have a lot of peace, or if we have like a lot of suffering, then we have a little bit of peace,
Yeah.
or like when is this trade-off worth it? And that's the part that you
Right.
don't ever put. That's why that's a squirrely saying.
Well, it's like
Because there's no transactional nature of it.
So is
it's
it like the more
let's fight the bad guys so then we get some peace? No, that's
Right.
not what they're saying at all. There's no principle to it.
or is it the more people I kill, the less people there will be to fight me later?
I think it's a dialectic thing, actually.
Well,
It's
let me
like
let me
when
finish
they talk
this.
about Hegel and the dialectic
Yeah.
and all this stuff.
Well, yeah, no, and that's why I say it is a squirrely saying intentionally, and it probably intentionally just to screw with people. But when I'm thinking about motivation for a character, right? This guy's got a lot of revenge motivations going on, but he also has this like megalomaniacal thing, and that's why he stays in fights.
Right.
He fights the girl and all that. But let's compare this to like the Amazon's Jack Ryan series,
Okay.
where I thought was something. Let's look at the villains that people are allowed to play these days, and I feel like it's funny to me that the one villain they could choose, or they felt like they could comfortably choose without stepping on too many toes, was to just pick somebody who's like kill everybody because that's essentially what they said.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, he never quantifies it. He never says why. He never says how. It's this sort of
He's a terrorist.
snake
Yeah.
oil.
That's what he
salesman
do.
Sort of pitch.
That's how he roll.
That's how he rolls, and that is one somewhat weak aspect about it. And the only reason why it bears up well in Mission Impossible is because the guy has an excellent character, a compelling character that makes him somebody worth following. And I guess we get the idea that the people who follow him because they feel like they can get get power out of this new world order that comes out the other side.
Yeah.
Which is something I felt like they made clear in Kingsman, which is why I think some of that made sense.
Yeah, see, I
Let
totally
me finish.
understood it.
Let me finish.
When it came to that guy, he was obviously an extreme version of a person that everybody sees on CNN bloviating about how all the population's going to die if we don't do something, and then they say, "What are you going to do?" And he's like, "I don't know." and then you can just see the psychopath in this guy saying, screaming on his shoulder, "Just kill a bunch of people and everything will be fine."
All the dumb things we think.
I was
and
going
then
to say,
decide not to do.
just
But
occurred to
let
me.
me finish the Jack Ryan.
Okay, fine.
The Jack
Finish
Ryan
up.
character is very, very different. Like I've only seen the first 2 episodes, and Craig's
I finished it.
watched it in like 3 minutes. One day.
2 days.
but I
Binge
thought
watching
it was
for the win.
I thought it was very compelling just up through the second episode because the main character is not only a compelling character, the main villain, I mean, is not only a compelling character, but he's got I should just say moral reasons for what he's doing.
There's a tragedy.
There's a tragedy, and
And the more you watch the show, the more they reveal what that is.
yeah.
If it has
You
anything
get-
to
But
do
is
with
it a
Predator
good
drones, I'm
comparison?
gonna
You see what I'm
check
saying?
out.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
asking. There's still that good
They
comparison.
always do that.
And there's still an attachment to this ideology. And the thing is snake oil salesmen are not. Let me put it this way: the enemies that you in real life, the enemies that are dangerous and are hard to fight, are the people who are smart, and not the snake oil salesmen.
Yep.
They are the people who are smart and have thought through what they want to believe, and then they're going to do it no matter what.
And actually believe it.
Right, and actually believe it, and that their ideology has some inkling of truth to it. And I think that's what makes an ideology hard to fight, because it can be very, very wrong and still have a lot of truth to it. And I think that's one of the things that you see where they go, "Oh, well, I see where you're fighting these guys because we were fighting for our country," or something like that. And then he blows it off into this huge vendetta, something that's much more massive. And Bin Laden did the same thing, and that's who they're comparing him to. There's a personal element, and there's also a pragmatic element to it that let me put it this way, people believe what they want to believe, and that's what you're
Right.
seeing him do. He wants to believe that this stuff is true because of his character, right? His past as a character. He's gone through these
Right.
tragedies, and so he wants to believe that stuff is true because then he can get back at the people who he wants to whack. But that screws with his ability to interface with real people, his children, his wife,
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And that's what makes a man evil. That's what makes a person evil.
But I don't think he believes he's evil either.
Oh,
He
no, of
believes
course
his
not.
convictions and
Right.
You notice a lot of things when you have evil characters who are truly evil, they almost
Sounds
never
already.
say or admit that they're evil, even if they think it at heart. Usually they will say that it's like they will say that line you were talking earlier where they say nothing is true, everything is permitted. That line is actually from a novel called Alamute.
Yep.
And
I was
which is
looking
about
that
these
up, actually.
assassins, and it was written by this Hungarian guy who was talking about. Actually, he was comparing them to like this Hungarian kind of Marxist group, rebel group, and so that's where
Are they
a lot
related
of,
to the Illuminati?
well, see, well, no. See, the point of it is that you have this guy, or these characters in this story, and I haven't read. I keep trying to find the novel so I can read it, but it's this kind of postmodern idea where he's kind of criticizing them for believing this, because essentially what he's saying is that these characters, the assassins that are in the temple, in the fortress Alamute, they have all these rules that they lay down to their followers, but at the same time their chief principle way up at the top is that there are no rules, and do what you have to do to win, because and gain power.
Well, and that's what I
and-
think makes a lot of
and-
people evil, is this when you
But see,
eventually
yeah,
break
see,
down to this pure
This
pursuit
is
of power.
this is something C.S. Lewis said. He also he said it was the more evil. I keep thinking of these great lines from C.S. Lewis, but I can't quote them
Exactly.
verbatim, and I need to find
butcher
it. Yeah,
Go ahead and
he
butcher it. We'll
basically
find it later.
yeah he
Just
basically
paraphrase.
said that the nature of good and evil have this sense to them where the more evil you become, the more numb to the difference between good and evil you are. So
Yeah.
so you know that you've been numbing yourself and reducing your knowledge of the difference.
But you're more
you have
inclined
this
to not
conscience.
care.
You have your conscience, right? And
Yeah.
you've been pricking and just cauterizing each nerve over and over and over again by repeated evil. And so by the time you get to the point where someone is totally evil, they cannot tell the difference between evil and good. You don't have this. Well, ironically, his example was Faust, who
Yeah.
is the guy the German folktale, and this guy sells his soul to the devil,
Right.
and eventually he goes to hell railing against stuff.
He doesn't go to
And-
hell.
He doesn't?
Faust does not go to hell.
I thought he does.
He gets redeemed at the end.
Different I think you're right, but it was like a different there's a couple of versions. Some of them he goes to hell, and some of them he
But mostly because the devil gets screwed. But
yeah,
the devil
and
should get screwed. So
It's
I'm
like
okay
a
with
deal
that.
with the devil, and then the devil gets screwed at the end, which is great,
Yeah.
But I like that. But it was like you can't. Anyway, but yeah. So the difference starts to become cloudy, and so what they say, and then what they say in private, where it's like, I don't think there's a difference between good and evil. That's the one of the signals that's one of the signs. They would never tell you I'm evil and I know it.
Yeah, yeah,
unless
no,
you're-
exactly. It's
even like the Joker. That's basically the Joker's view. He's this nihilistic view, and he tells everybody. His point is not that he's evil. His point is that everyone is all these systems are constructed, and that if you threaten people, they'll just revert to survivalist instinct and
Yeah.
eat each other. He says,
Right.
he's like, these people will eat each other.
and that's why I say
Oh.
I think it's much more scary to have someone who has a lot of truth and one bad thing or several bad things
That was
they
another
are
thing
just
Lewis said, yeah.
fanatically chasing.
Is that-
because they're going to be much smarter
It's-
than somebody who's just straight up
Right.
crazy. Because there's two kinds of people you got to fight, right? There's the random evil that occurs, which makes people more like just a force of nature, which is part of what makes the Joker so scary, is
Right.
because he acts like a force of nature. He's just random.
Mm-hmm.
He's crazy and random, but he doesn't have like an ideological thing beyond, blow it all up. He just wants to see the world burn, right?
Right.
But the people I think who are more terrifying by far are the people who have they've got something attached to something true, but it's going to cost everybody everything they have.
A bit more like Bane, I guess.
Yeah, but like Bane or like Stalin or like Mao. I mean, there
Yeah,
are
I
people
think
who are
Stalin-
totally fastened
Sta-
to some things because it cements their position.
Stalin got a little bit more
Well, they don't care. He just doesn't care.
The thing about Stalin was he was a truly evil, crazy person, but he was on top of a ideology that allowed him to do that, and went, well, it must be the right thing to do. See,
well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think he was that crazy. You get what I'm saying? It's not the crazy evil that's scary.
Well, he was definitely smart. Yes,
that's all I'm
you're
saying.
Right. He didn't get crazy until later.
Yeah,
but he was always kind of a sadist.
I mean, evil will make you
psychopath.
Crazy. Yeah, we'll make that clear.
Yeah, I know.
But,
one more thing. I was talking about. Here's the thing about genre, and I think genre is interesting because if you know what's going on and you know what genre you're in, then it really can improve your understanding of what's going on. But like as a writer, you can get clouded by genre, and so people will see holes in your story that you would not otherwise notice. Because you're like, hey, but they don't know it's a play off something else. Like, for instance, Inglourious Basterds, we were talking about that earlier. So the movie Inglourious Basterds is a satire of war films. All those commando films from, the 60s and 50s and 70s where, you had this team of roughnecks, like the Dirty Dozen.
Yeah.
Or like
Dirty Dozen Gone Wrong.
What was
That's what it was.
Well, yeah, it basically is the Dirty Dozen Gone Wrong. And what was it? The last one, Where Eagles Dare. See, Where Eagles Dare and The Dirty Dozen and those kind of movies, which were already kind of satires of war films themselves.
Yeah.
They were kind of more violent and a little bit more nihilistic than, something like The Sands of Iwo Jima or whatever.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that and you see Inglourious Basterds and it's like, that's what World War II is like. I'm going to make a World War II film and play it straight. You're not going to make a good movie. Why? Because Inglourious Basterds is a satire.
So how does that relate to Mission Impossible?
Well, because the Mission Impossible is that whole movie and is a product of a genre that was shaped during the Cold War. And so the villains in these, like if you go all the way back, a lot of the villains in these movies are influenced by these Bond villains.
Oh yeah, no, that's for sure. He's definitely attached to a Bond villain.
And you notice one thing that happened during the Cold War, and I mean all the way back, there was kind of two things that would happen. And in the Bond films were kind of notable because they would not really avoid this. They would have these crazy, supervillain characters who wanted to build like satellites and lasers and blow up, Fort Knox with a nuke and things, absurd things like that. But you ask yourself, where did he get all his money? And most of the time, the answer was the Soviets are backing them. Spectre is actually a fictionalized version of Smersh, which was a Russian. They were like the KGB, but they weren't the KGB. They were specifically geared towards sabotage.
Right.
And that factors into communism and the way they would spread it. And the way they would spread it is that would try to cause unrest and revolution in, a country. And so the government would collapse, and the communists would move in and say the government can't control it, and they're being unjust. So the only way you can save yourselves is to become communist. And that's how the Soviet bloc expanded for the first 20 years or so.
And that game is still being played. I think we always act like the Cold War is over, but that game is being played in Ukraine right now.
Right, exactly. They're doing the exact same thing. But the interesting thing is that
still exist.
So back there, so you have Goldfinger and you have a couple of these others. I don't remember, and there were a couple of them were actual like Soviet generals who wanted to, we're going to invade Europe. And that was a thing that everybody was scared of during the Cold War is that the Russians were going to sweep through Europe through the Fulda Gap.
That would have been a problem.
Right, and was it the NATO's tactical analysis? They were always kind of on the alert and had tank divisions in Europe for years and years and years.
Well, let's make this clear. The reason why is because they knew they never had enough stuff to hold back the Russians, and so the only plan they had was basically using tactical nukes to funnel the Russians into a killing zone.
Exactly,
and then beating with superior air fire. Yeah,
and that's where a lot of, and basically that's where a lot of that framing of things comes from, is this idea that you have this supervillain who is deniable on the part of the communists, but he's backed by the communists. And that was the contrast, was you had the Western guy who's the individualist, James Bond, versus the the top down, intellectual hierarchical Soviet
Organization, whatever it
supervillain,
is.
and
Yeah.
who wants to cause terrorism and change society by this sort of blah 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 blah, and he would have a bunch of things, and then they also during the Cold War at the same time, and all this character goes all the way back, and I mean like the Man from U.N.C.L.E., the original series, the Man from U.N.C.L.E. was geared towards it was less about saying that communists were bad and more about saying that we shouldn't start a nuclear war, will end humanity, and so.
Yeah.
It was about that cooperation thing. See, so like the other half of half the spy thrillers are about how the communists are trying to take over the West, and then the other half of the spy thrillers are about this rogue guy who's going to cause a nuclear war between the great powers and destroy everyone. And this could be a former Nazi, or this could be basically just anybody. But it was just somebody they figured will direct everybody's hatred towards something legitimately bad, and then we won't break out into a giant war and kill a bunch of billion people. And so you had the Man from U.N.C.L.E., and you notice how you have the Soviet guy and the Western guy, and they're both working together. It's like they're on a team, like Lethal Weapon. That was all the way back in the original series. They had it that way.
Well,
And
I have this
so you have
interesting-
that guy, and you have
Yeah.
all the villains from that. And essentially, a lot of these end up, especially in the latter case, where you have a Soviet and a Western guy working together. Almost all of the villains are basically constructed. They're kind of moral lessons, and also they're like, it's sort of like how in Red Dawn, North Korea the villain was changed to North Korea. It's like, let's just make him somebody everybody hates. So a lot of the things about those characters is that, even after the Soviet Union fell, well, now we don't even have to pretend we're not talking about communism. We're only trying to create a villain to make an action movie.
Yeah.
So so you have these guys, and their motivations is like never the point. It's constantly glossed over.
Well,
because
let me mention
it's
something
it's about the
yeah.
enemy, the real enemy in a Mission Impossible film through all of them.
Yeah.
Even like in MI3, which has one of the most memorable villains in the series.
Mission Impossible 3.
Yeah, with Owen Damien.
Yeah.
Even with that one, it's like he gets killed in that before the fight is over.
Yeah.
Because the fight is the timer in a Mission Impossible movie. The antagonist is almost always the timer. It's the countdown. I have to do this thing, and I have to do it perfectly at just the right second, or the whole world will end.
It's like a movie version of 24.
Yeah, exactly. Well, 24 is basically working on the same principle.
What do you think of that, Craig?
I agree. That was a lot of deep. I don't know.
That was a lot of, yeah.